Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. My name is Colin Moriarty. Today I'm joined by a very special guest. We haven't had him on the show for a while, but now is the time. Very exciting time indeed. The PS5 Pro has been revealed. So let's welcome Tom from Moore's Law is Dead, Broken Silicon Podcast, back to the show. How are you today, my friend? Good to see you.
I'm good. It's great to see you again. I guess it is the time, but you have obviously followed PlayStation and console much more intensively than I do. Like, this is the most drawn out launch of a new console ever. Like we've kind of known what this was going to be for, I feel like, almost a year now. And there's been like little updates every week. I don't remember it being that closely followed for that long with any other console, really, besides maybe the Switch 2, I suppose. But
yeah, the leaks have come in pretty hot, for a while. Ended up being pretty reliable. Your sources, Tom Henderson had sources, a couple other people. People had started talking to me about it in January when outside publishers started getting shown the console and kind of briefed on it. So it's been announced and people know about it. We talked about it on Sacred last week. We'll get into all that. But before we do, how's life? How's everything going with you? And how's the channel? It's a new background.
Yeah. I mean, this is like about a year ago. I got a new house with my girlfriend.
Nice. Congratulations.
So now we live together. It's been fantastic. It's been a very, very, very weird year. On the one hand, the channel is doing incredibly well right now, and we're expanding the content and the size of the team. On the other hand, there are like health issues, like they're just being honest, deaths in the family. It's been a roller coaster of a year, but at the same time, and I'm just speaking at a macro level. This has been, I think, probably a weird year for most people.
Yeah, it has been. Well, congratulations on the house. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Happy for you. It's a big deal.
Yeah. Let me say, too, I already reached out to Dustin privately a couple weeks ago. Briefly, we exchanged a few messages, but I do want to say that I saw it, on Twitter, and then you guys talked about it on the podcast. Like, just extending my best wishes is the best way I think I can put it to Dustin for what he's been going through. And I certainly could never imagine, what he's going through, because that's something you only understand if you've done it. But I actually found out pretty recently that, my parents had to deal with several miscarriages between me and my brother. And it's something that we didn't realize how much of their personality and how much weight on them until recently. And so I at least at a distance, I've seen how it's big. And, I really, as a bystander, but an informed bystander, understand like how much he's dealing with and hope him the best. But again, I've reached out to him privately. I just wanted to say that as well.
It's much appreciated. I know that everyone's well wishes from co-hosts and from the audience alike has kept him going. He did come back to the show last week to talk about Pro. I think he'll be kind of reintegrating himself slowly, but I'm letting him take whatever time he needs. It's unthinkable. And the only thing that I walk away from, and I told him this and I said it on the show too, is just like, I am so tired of these things happening to good people. Like, you don't want it to happen to anyone, obviously, but it's like, damn, the best people, the people most prepared to be a parent, to be eager and excited, and it's like, I just, that roll of the dice is just, it's unfair, and that's what really gets me the most. But he appreciates it. I appreciate it too. He's a good friend of mine. But we're here today, Tom, and it's good to have you to talk about PS5 Pro. We know, like you said, we've had, you and I have talked on this very show about the console when it was first rumored, and now it's real. It is called the Pro. I don't know what else they would have called it, and so we know that. And there is a PlayStation blog post all about it. There was a 10-minute or so Mark Cerny video that showed it off a little bit, but we know that the three pillars: upgraded GPU, advanced ray tracing, and AI-driven upscaling. What are your thoughts on this console? I will say I was surprised by, you emailed me, and one of the things that I thought was interesting that I haven't heard anyone talk about, and you say here, I don't think you'll mind, is that you think they're being pretty aggressive in selling this at $700 by making a nice little amount of money. A nice little profit. The margins are good. So what are your thoughts, high level thoughts about PS5 Pro?
Well, and I did listen to your guys' conversation about the Pro, and I have to say that I did love Dustin's entrance of "be careful what you wish for." And I understand why he said that, because he came in and said, tell me if my characterization you would disagree, but he's basically said it's more expensive than we expected, but it doesn't seem bad. And people are catastrophizing and acting a little ridiculous. And I understand where he's coming from to a certain extent. This is a big problem. Like I've had to deal with like talking about Zen 5, which I did think had a bad launch, and talking about Lunar Lake, which I thought could have been better, or Strix is better than people. All these things I talk about in the PC space. And there's this initial reaction the internet has, and there is this tendency to try to go along to get along. And I know I feel that all the time because I'm pretty clearly a contrarian, I think. So I often don't agree, and I'm not afraid to say it. But, him saying, be careful what you wish for. I kind of want to start this by asking you, Colin, did you go into this expecting people to consider you, Chris, and Dustin's opinions to be hot takes? Because you all said you're going to get it. Granted, you're a enthusiast hardware channel.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is lost on people. Like, duh, this is
right.
What we cover. Why would we not get it? But did you expect? You've certainly seen some comments by now. Like, how have people reacted to your opinions, and has any of it surprised you?
No, I mean, I think that a lot of the surprise comes from, it's not a surprise, it's an acknowledgement that like the internet has just become, and the gaming space has become deeply toxified, because it's like so navel gazing to talk about it all the time, but it is true. Like, I've been doing this for 22 years. So like, I know how it's evolved. There's always been a weird hostile kind of thing going on, but not like this. And, not anywhere close to what's going on with this. So I tried it. The Last of Us Part 2 was the first thing that I ever saw treated like a certain way. And it seems like it's kind of bubbled to that with everything. I said on the show, essentially, the proof's going to be in the pudding. If what people out there are saying is true, no one wants this, then there should be no problems being able to pre-order one on PlayStation Direct an hour after it goes live on the 26th or whatever. We'll see. I mean, I think, I'm disappointed that there's a lot going on. There are people that are watching other people's pockets, which I don't like that kind of shit. Trying to tell them how they should spend their money. This is why I said on Sacred Symbols that I tried to say, I approach it from two different perspectives. There's the perspective of having no money. I was there, and I used the specific example of PS3 Slim and how I waited years for the PS3 to get to $300 because I simply wouldn't and couldn't afford it at any other price. The difference is that I didn't say like, oh, you shouldn't buy a PS3 until it's $300. You're a fucking idiot. Why do you need a PS3? So that's that. And I sympathize with that because I was there at one time in my life. No doubt about it. And then there's the other side of it about the need of it. And I tried to say and compare it to the way I felt about PS4 Pro, which I was very down on when it was announced, specifically because, as I noted on the show, developers were scared of it and didn't know how it was going to really play out. In terms of development, is it going to be another thing we have to worry about? Are people going to get hung up on this shit? And then it came to be that it was very simple. And I ended up getting my own PS4 Pro in 2017 and played the back half of PS4 on Pro. So from an enthusiast perspective, I'm really into it. I'm just disappointed that people can't discuss things reasonably and get mad about about how things are expensive, how other people are spending their money, about how that feeds into market economies, because they want this thing to fail. And they don't want anyone to buy it, but they don't understand that's not the vote. The vote is on a buy wallet comparison. And so, yeah, that's kind of the way I see it, is that I expect negativity with everything. I think I understand. The thing I understand the most, and this is what I put into words, was the situation I'm in. And I use, it's kind of a stupid comparison, Tom, but it's like, I can afford, and you can too, all of these different subscription services, but I refuse to, because I'm simply not going to do it. I'm not paying $22 for Netflix. Maybe if I wanted to watch something on it, I'll go get it for a month and then I'll cancel it. That's where I feel like a lot of people are with PS5 Pro, where they're like, yeah, I could. I just don't want it. I don't think it's worth it. And I'm like, that's perfect. That's totally fine. But why can't we be reasonable about it and not insult other people? So the price is a little hot. I get the sticker shock. We've never seen consoles this much. But I think people have gotten lost too in the weeds about the economic situation, especially globally with conversion rates and, of course, inflation. So I just think that people want to pretend that these things don't matter, but of course they do. And I think that's what Dustin was really getting into, especially on the show, is like, we can talk about, have wages kept up? What's the GDP? All this kind of stuff. I'm like, these are all separate and important questions. But this console is what it is based on 2024, the economy and all that kind of stuff. We were paying $500 for a PS5 in 2020. So that's where I am. I don't know. That's a lot of rambling, but I don't know if that makes sense to you. But where does any of that resonate?
Oh, entirely. And a through line just to kind of set the table for like the mentality I think you're talking about here is I don't know if you've ever like looked at the audience reviews on Rotten Tomatoes and it'll be like good ending, good acting, didn't like this. Oh, I liked this. The ending was bad. And then there will be one person like, why are they hiding conservative talking points in this movie? And I'm like, what are you do you just see liberal or conservative in everything you watch? And when you look at people get mad at a PS5 Pro or AMD Zen 5, although different situation entirely, in my opinion, sometimes you'll see their anger. It's about something else. And they're just turning everything into this. And they probably should just do it, admit they have another hobby that they can go do instead of turning everything into what their big problem is. Like, this is why my daughter won't talk to me. It's because the PS5 Pro costs too much and that's Biden's fault or something. It's
Right,
like,
right.
you can see it in half of these comments.
Sure. It's shitty. It's just, I was thinking a little cheaper, but I don't know. See, this is why I wanted to have you on and why I think it's important I had Dustin and Chris to talk to as well, is like, I don't know shit. So I don't know exactly how much these are supposed to cost or whatever. So let's talk about that, since that's the thing people are getting into.
And that's where we can get into like why I think you said like my take was a bit negative. That's my initial hot take is what it means, not that it's overpriced compared to the competition, which I would like to get to what Xbox is charging for stuff right now as a comparison. Because we have to admit this is not in a vacuum. And then I'd like to talk about the performance because I think the value is there. It just is. It's just not the same value we are used to expecting, which maybe was insane, but that's its own argument. I think the problem I have with the PS5 Pro is that it signifies that, yeah, Sony's going to $600 at least next gen. We know it. I mean, this is them, in my opinion, going, we don't need to sell a single one of these damn things, do we? I mean, this is a victory lap. This is to market GTA 6 at higher frame rates than Xbox. This is what we're going to, with our exclusive marketing package with Rockstar as usual, probably. This is what we're using this for. None of this has to do with price performance. If we want to expand the tent, we'll drop the PlayStation Slim to $370. That's what we'll do. This isn't going to expand the market share. And I'm sure they have data for PS4 Pro where they're like, I think it was 15% of PS4 Pro sales or 15% of PlayStation 4 was Pro sales. So they're like, they probably have data that says, and that 15%, 80% of them are people who already owned a PS4 or something. And so this isn't for new people. This isn't for anything but marketing. So let's make some money off of this thing because we don't even need to launch it. And that's something that I've leaked multiple times here is the PS5 Pro's design was done years ago. They even had the silicon done and validated. They could have launched this at the beginning of this year at a minimum, maybe even late last year. So I don't think they wanted to launch this, and they waited until final confirmation that the Xbox Elite was canceled, which I got confirmation at the beginning of this year. And they said, we don't even want to launch it, but it's a sunk cost. We put in the development. So we don't plan to sell a lot of them. It's only to people who already have it, and that's why we're going to charge more. And we're going to use this as a test vehicle to see if we can get away with this amount of money. And there's a part of me that is probably naive, but it's this isn't even the right term, but this is what people usually say. The pro-consumer side, it's maybe the advocate, you would say, where it's like, Sony is so close to closing the door on Xbox. We can talk about if they already have, doesn't matter, maybe. But if they just went to like, whatever it would be, like $519, so they could say, you can get this or $529. You can get this and a game for the same price as the 2 terabyte Xbox Series X, or this and a disc drive for about the same price. You can get, move the PlayStation 5 Slim to, I don't know, right? I think $370, just refuse to charge as little as the Series S. And go, yeah, you can get this in a disc drive for $450, or this in a game for a little more than a Series X that doesn't even have a disc drive. Like, this would be them completely closing the door, and I don't think Xbox would ever come back from it. And then that's where you get all of the software money. So it's not that I'm like, I think there's a real argument to be made that this seems a little silly because they've got the market on their side. And if they stuck the landing on this, they don't have competition next gen. And what this tells me is they're okay not going for the kill, number one. And number two, that they might be perfectly happy being a big fish in a medium-sized pond instead of a big fish in a giant fish in an ocean, because it's the safe play short term. That's my concern with it, because if they were to play this right and grow their market share even more, you could see them pressing gaming competition outside of just console, like really pushing the boundaries on what they can do. And I think that we need more competition against not just Xbox, but everywhere right now, because everyone is trying to milk everyone in gaming right now. And I think there's an argument to be made that Sony has a more long-term view of letting you own your games and do that. And where they do expand more, I think that could be the better long-term play that keeps people on their side. And I just think they kind of no, and I actually think it's a little overplayed, the no console stand. I'm pretty sure it will stand up by itself fine. But it does, like, even that, it's like there is something to be said about perception that I think, even if this is a victory lap, seems like silly to not worry about to me.
Yeah, it's Sony's in a strange place right now because there's just a lot of inertial movement without making many moves. They're more silent than ever. The releases are fewer than ever.
Mm-hmm.
The PR beats are fewer than ever. There's very little marketing. And then the console just sells. And then when they release a game, it sells 10 million copies or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they look at that and they're like, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That's why I think people have lost the forest for the trees as far as PS5 Pro is concerned, and kind of the consternation around it is like, this didn't remove the PS5.
Sure.
Like it doesn't, the PS5 is going to be there forever. They're going to manufacture it for 10 more years probably. And you'll be able to buy it. Eventually you'll be able to buy it for very cheap. You can also play on PS4. I go through my friends list all the time, and there's still a bunch of people on PS4. Sony even says that there are 3 million people per quarter still playing on PS3, which is crazy. So,
do you know the number per quarter on PS4?
It was 118 million, I think. Or no, they combine the numbers now, so it's between the two consoles, 118 million or something like that, I think.
And so that's another thing here that I'm concerned Sony doesn't get. I don't own any stock in Sony, so I don't really care, I guess. But like, were I to be an advocate for them, which this is a PlayStation podcast, although it's an objective one. But, I'd say, Sony, do you understand that there's like 20, 30 million, maybe more PlayStation 4 owners who will not upgrade until you lower the price? They're not going to.
Right.
It's the analogy I've been making on my own podcast is it's like, I think a lot of companies are forgetting this right now. And you see it in their earnings where they're like, there's inflation. We just tried to keep prices high and people just stop buying our stuff. Like, if Volkswagen was the last car company on earth, and then you go, well, we have no competition. Motorcycles don't really compete with us. Scooters don't. But then you tried to sell a Jetta for 200 grand because you don't have competition. I'm going to wager more people will be taking buses and riding motorcycles. I think there's a country in Asia where there's like an absurd tax on a car. And that is what happened. Like, there's a 100% tax. And so it's like, I don't know if Sony gets that. I understand you don't have competition. And again, I'd love to touch on the Xbox side of it. Because they're not making Sony lower these prices. And there's an argument to be made. Sony's just following a formula that's been working against them and probably will still work. But like, there are just people that aren't going to upgrade. There are people that aren't going to support PS5 game sales. I would argue we're not seeing the PS5 be fully utilized because half of the people continue to just play on PS4 and Sony. It doesn't matter if Xbox, was raptured away from existence. No, there are some people that want the PS5 to be a little cheaper to buy in, and they're never going to, and that could hold back the development of your truly modern AAA games and the user base that would actually pay for them.
Yeah, it's insightful in the sense that, well, let's talk. I mean, you wanted to talk about Xbox. I mean, the thing I'll say about them is just because you asked earlier, like, has Sony kind of put them away? It's like, yeah, they're done. I mean, as far as I think
there's an argument they don't need to do anything, and they're just done. Yeah,
yeah. I just don't. And I'm of the mind that it doesn't really matter what Xbox does now. Like, it's over. Like the Microsoft Gaming will become a huge publisher of games, and it's already beginning. It'll be funny and I think ironic when Indiana Jones runs best on PS5 Pro. And these are the things that they're going to have to deal with all of the games that are going to come over, and inevitably Avowed and Fable and all the things that will inevitably migrate to other places. So I do think that there is something to be said about a lack of immediate near-term competition, because I just think Sony doesn't take Xbox very seriously anymore. This is why I it's so funny when people, and I wonder if you agree, it's like people are like, well, Sony's getting games from Microsoft. They'll eventually put their games on Xbox. And I'm like, I don't think so.
No.
Like, I think that
Why?
Sony's perfectly happy putting their boot on Xbox's throat and crushing it.
Were Xbox to be selling incredibly well right now and games to be selling even half the number of copies as the PlayStation counterpart, I think Sony would consider putting some of their games on Xbox. But what we've seen is Xbox is where you go to have your games never be bought by anyone. So I don't know why they would do that.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I know my audience rolls their eyes because they've heard me say it a million times, but for people that haven't heard me say it or need it to be reiterated, it's like, I don't blame Xbox for making the choices they made about Game Pass, making the choices they made about a cheaper console. They made choices that I think they had to upend the market. They were losing and they did what they had to do. It just didn't, it wasn't executed well, and it didn't turn out right. And it's too late now,
Mm-hmm.
like Call of Duty's coming into Game Pass. It's too late. Like it's not going to change anything. In fact, I'm pretty sure internally that they're not even really allowed to promote Xbox or Game Pass and Call of Duty together in major
Mm-hmm.
ways because they barely ever talk about it. Because I think internally they're like, dude, we don't want people to go to Game Pass. We want people to buy it.
Yeah.
Don't you guys understand? So yeah,
But let me touch on Xbox though, because
yeah.
I think that was the next thing I wanted to bring up here
Sure.
is, and I haven't seen a lot of people push back against this, but people, I mean, come on. Xbox is selling a 4 teraflop Series S for $349, and the thing can't even run Wukong. I mean, this is a complete joke with it. That thing should be $200 as a door into the Xbox ecosystem. And Sony's charging 30% more than that for the PS5 Slim. Neither of them come with a disk drive. So you look at that and you go, 30% more gets you, I don't know, triple the performance and a brand people, buy into more easily. If you do the math of the Series X 2 terabyte to the PS5 Pro and add the disk drive, like 780 divided by 600, it's 30%. So I think Sony triangulated, well, Microsoft has this clearly way lower performance console with the same amount of storage, no disk drive right here. We're just going to do this with the disk drive. It's the exact same price difference. And might I add, the $450 Series X also doesn't have a disk drive, and you can never add a disk drive, the Series S or the Series X anymore, only the top model. So that's gone. And that's a value you can never fix. You get it. You're never being able to buy discs. Microsoft has locked you in to always giving them a cut. You're not going on eBay and getting a game for discount. That's Sony. You can get a disk drive later. That is something to be said. And even the 2 terabyte Series X is a special edition. Special is another word for limited, usually. They're about to just remove the disk drive entirely and charge the same price as Sony. And it's like, I don't know. You look at that and you go, Microsoft is certainly not offering, good value here. And that's a reason why we have to, you have to take, accountability for why they got here. And it is because Xbox hasn't really been making a compelling argument for years. They feel allowed to do this. So Sony's greedy. I mean, guys, Xbox is charging $100 or more for their Vita memory cards right now. Well, even the Pro lets you still put in a $100 2 terabyte SSD for the price of a 1 terabyte or less than the price of a 1 terabyte Xbox One. So I don't even think Sony's being the most greedy, if we're being fair.
You brought up the disk drive, so it's a good way to jump off. What do you think about the Pro not coming with a disk drive? To me, this was obviously going to happen. I understand. I actually just tweeted out. I tweet out clips of the show to harvest views on Twitter, and I tweeted out like, you're a relic, basically. If you're even caring about this, it's cool if you care about it, but you have to understand that you're not the standard anymore. You're not even remotely the standard if you put discs into your console. And while I understand the Pro is supposed to be like, this is like the boutique version of the console, the best version, you want to have the disk drive. I'm like, no, I just feel like, dude, I'm going to upgrade. And I haven't put a disc into my PS5 one time. And I said on the show, I don't even know if my disk drive works. It might not even work. It had to come with the console, the higher end console. And I bought it. I could have, I guess, gotten the solid state one. And I just feel like this is not a problem. Do you agree, or do you feel like people should have expected a disk drive?
I think it's a good way to piss off your hardcore fans, which are the people that wanted to buy this in the first place. I mean, you don't use your disk drive. I actually do occasionally. I know Dustin does. So I think
Dustin does.
a decent proportion of enthusiasts on PlayStation use their disk drive. And now you're saying it's $699 and it doesn't come with a disk drive. I think it's a good way that the people that would have wanted this the most would have felt like a slap in the face. Is it the biggest deal? I think it's a sign that this is a new era of PlayStation where they know they're in charge. Hopefully they don't make stupid decisions like PS3 did, because, the PS3, it wasn't just that it cost 600. There were a lot of mistakes. I suspect they won't make as many mistakes as they did back then. I hope they've learned from mistakes, but it is the signal that this is money Sony now. Are they any more greedy than their competition? No. But, I will say this as well. I could also see this as a test to see what to do with disk drives on next gen, because I've long held the opinion not only that they would not include the disk drive for the Pro, why would you? Even if you're not going to be greedy, just make it $499 or something without a disk drive, because you've made this disk drive. They can just, if someone has a Slim with a disk drive, you could argue you're saving them money. They just get that and they just slap the same one in. I think they're seeing if they should make it so this disk drive can connect to the PlayStation 6. And what happened? Disk drive sells out on Amazon. Still can't get it for a reasonable price. So I think Sony, the one piece of candy I'll throw to people is I think Sony's going to look at that data and go, we shouldn't remove the disk drive from PS6. We're not going to include it, but we should make sure you can connect it because clearly this matters to people. People have voted with their wallets. They want a disk drive, and I think people want a disk drive for insurance. That's how I look at it. Microsoft has removed insurance. There is no insurance. They can shut down Xbox. Your games are gone. Bye. And they might be. There's no promise they won't. I've seen in my lifetime GameFly and many services, not as big as them, fall apart. But we've seen that Microsoft doesn't really seem to care about respecting anything they say or honoring their promises. So I think it matters to have that disk drive always there because if something stupid happens, if they're like, you know what, due to inflation, we're going to double the price of every game on PSN, even though that's not the rate of inflation, they're probably not. But you can always go to eBay and get a disc, and it's insurance. And I think it's important to have that as an option, which they didn't remove from the Pro. But yeah, I think people got mad at that because of who would want a disk drive in it, which is the people who want a Pro.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. You would think it would be the highest end enthusiasts, the Blu-ray collectors and the game collectors like Dustin and all that. To me, it just made sense. You said it too, and it seemed obvious. It's like, of course, the PS5 Slim disk drive is going to work with the Pro model, and that's what they ended up doing. I have no problem with it. Yeah, it would have been nice to get a little price cut. Some people are arguing that maybe it's balanced out by this bigger SSD that it's coming with, but I don't know if that's actually true or not.
An extra $30 maybe. I mean,
that doesn't sound quite right. But yeah, it's not that I'm anti-disc. It's that I don't think people see reality for what it is, that this has been getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse for digital sales. Capcom reports 90% or 92% sales are digital sales. EA reports 80%, and they have a very casual audience. So people are getting comfortable buying things digitally. And I personally think we should just embrace it. But I understand people want their discs and all of the rest. But I think that people don't think about the imperative. And this is not to, fuck Sony for this. It's just, this is the reality is they don't want to make discs. They want to sell you discs as long as you demand them in some reasonable
which
number.
I think people just have.
Right. But they have to make them and print them and ship them and split money with people. They don't want to sell games that way at all. And what bothers me a little bit, and you might remember this with Vita, was that they did experiment with making games cheaper on Vita if they were digital. If you went and bought the games physically, especially at launch, they were like $5 or $10 more, and then they would give you a discount on digital. I'm like, why didn't you continue that to like kind of goad people into it, and then you don't have to worry about any of this physical stuff anymore? But I think they realize they're always going to have to worry about this physical stuff with a small fraction of people, though a vanishingly small fraction of people.
I don't know if this is a failed analogy, but I compare it to the gold standard. It's like, do we really need a gold standard with the dollar? No, until we do.
Right.
That's how I look at the discs. It's insurance. It's proof that I can own this game, even though I might not want to most of the time.
It's and I love that about Concord, especially recently, which is like really valuable on disc now. But you just put it in, it'll read on your cross media bar, but you can't start it up. But people do like having those physical goods. And I totally respect that and I appreciate that. It's like, no problem. We sell physical games at Lilymo. I have no problem doing that. I just am confused why there continues to be a market for it. But yeah, it does give you a little bit of security. The thing that bothers me, and I'm sure you identify this, you know a lot more about tech than I do, is the irony and the kind of the hypocrisy of people being like, well, the PS5 Pro, it sucks and it doesn't even have a disk drive. I'm going to build a PC. And I'm like, there hasn't been a physical games market on PC in years, of any consequence. I remember getting Civ 4, I think, on disc or something like that, and people thought I was weird for that. So that's
Mass Effect the last game I got on disc. I'm trying to
2007
remember on PC. Yeah.
So it's been a long time, but to each their own. I don't want to judge people on that. I just understand Sony wanting to get away from that too, and I think they are successfully goading people with discounts and all of the rest to kind of move over. But what do you think about the power of the console? So we know. Nothing to the CPU, but the GPU is different. We'll have, I guess, this boutique and unique language, or this learning model rather, to figure out how to upscale things, and then you'll have this really nice ray tracing. So what do you think about these three pillars that they have focused on?
Yeah, I mean, I thought I think I remember you saying you didn't think the presentation was very good. I thought the presentation was good, but I hear that the complaints that most of what they showed off were games that you can play on PS4.
Yeah, I mean, that's a valid argument.
I think
It's
that's
like,
a
okay,
valid
you're showing
argument
us
there.
The Last of Us Part 2, you know?
But, I think a reason they didn't, and what stood out to me was just how weird it was. They didn't say the specs. Like, good Lord, was it the Mark Cerny Power Hour? The guy is like this many exact teraflops, compute units, Tempest engine, uses a modified RDNA 2 CU with this BVH structures, right? They didn't do any of that. They're just like, it has more transistors, buy. And I think that's because they don't feel like they need to get bogged down in the tech anymore because no one's comparing them to them. They don't have an Xbox Elite where they're going to need to worry about comparing the tech. And so they're just basically telling you it's better. We don't have competition. You can expect this level of performance in going home. And from that perspective, I thought it was interesting how straightforward they were in the presentation. As for the specs, I mean, the testing I'm seeing is this thing's pretty awesome, actually. Again, to me, this reads like a console that they initially intended to charge $500 to $600 for. This is something where, as far as I can tell, nothing's real. I mean, he uses the same plates, doesn't it, as the PlayStation 5 Slim?
Yeah, it should be. It's I think a little thinner, but yeah, we'll use the same outer plates.
But it's like, I don't know if it uses the same board as a new version of the Slim Wheel, but I'm telling you, it wouldn't surprise me if you took these things apart and the motherboard was the same and they're just like soldering a different CPU to it. And if it isn't the same, I bet they save money on how similar it's going to look. It's the same 256-bit bus, the same RAM modules around it. They're not increasing the RAM. I guess I've been told by developers with access to it, it has access to more memory, but not more physical memory, which is interesting. It'd be interesting to see how that plays out when they actually benchmark it, if that really works as well as they say it does, because it seems like it does. But there's if you're only changing the die, we're talking like 300 millimeter square to silicon here, and the silicon's 50% more expensive. So I don't know. I think you're going from like $50 to $80 to $100. This could have been $549 with the same margins, I think.
Oh, that's
Actually.
interesting. Yes. Yeah. So again, you're thinking they're being really aggressive with the margins, which is fascinating. I wonder. Well, I don't
Maybe
wonder.
600. Yeah.
They want to make. I get it. Like they want to make money. 600 would have been interesting. I kept saying that there's bad mojo around that number, but certainly, you don't want to dodge it to $700.
But maybe optically, that's what they're doing. They're saying we don't care anymore. That's why we said 700. So you don't complain about 600. We're making it very clear that we don't care.
Yeah. It's it's interesting. I would have loved to see how people what the reaction would have been at a slightly cheaper price point. Do you? Oh, go ahead, please.
Well, no, go on. What were you going to ask?
Well, I was just going to ask do you believe that they're going to have a problem selling these things at $700?
Okay, so that was one of the two ways I thought this could go next is, again, the PS4 Pro came out 3 years after the PS4. This is coming out 4 years after.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they even wanted to launch this. And this will be competing with RDNA 4, which is AMD's attempt again to get back market share from NVIDIA and graphics. It'll be competing with their MI25X AI cards that cost, $30,000 or whatever. It's going to be competing with their server chips that sell for $30,000 to, Amazon and Microsoft Azure and stuff. Like, they've got bigger fish to fry. If the PlayStation 4 Pro came out 3 years later and only was 15%, wouldn't surprise me if this is going to be 5 to 10% of the PlayStations they sell. And so you brought up, we're going to have to see if this sells out. Yeah, it might, because they perfectly calculated the people that would buy this, even if it was $1,000, said we'll make that many to, again, market GTA 6 next year, which sold more, GTA 5 sold more copies than I think all Xbox consoles combined or something. It's just outlandish, the sales. And then they'll call it a day. Like, I don't know if they really care. I don't know if they're worried. I think they know that they'll make enough for it to sell well. If it sells out, they'll take that data in and go $600 PS6. If it completely bombs, they'll go, all right, there's a limit. That's what I think. And I'm not. I don't know what will happen, but I guess if you put a gun up to my head, I'm gonna say it's gonna sell out.
Yeah, I think it'll be I personally think it's gonna be just fine. I saw Ampere analysis. And who knows if they were right or wrong. Obviously, it's just a prognostication. But they were saying that they expect it will sell comparable to PS4 Pro. Like that it'll sell basically as many units. We know from the Insomniac leak that it was about 15 million, right? Or something like that. So, which isn't way higher than I thought. I would have thought it was more like 7 to 10 or something like that.
And it could, but I don't think they care if it does. I think if it sells just 5 to 10%, They've done their victory lap. They got the data they needed. That's why they released this. Again, they could have launched this a year ago, people, but they didn't. They didn't want to do it. They're doing this for more than just launching something that it's not for market share.
Yeah, certainly not. There'll probably be the odd person that's like, I've waited this long, now I'll invest in the best PlayStation 5 ecosystem. But yeah,
if I've waited this long, I would choose this over the base.
Well, that's what Dustin was saying, and I thought he made a really compelling argument. It's like the value is low if you already have a PS5, but maybe higher if you don't. But the sticker shock is going to be greater. Will you miss it? You don't even know what you're missing because you never played the original PS5. Yeah, there's something fascinating you're saying, Tom, about them not really wanting to do it. This seems like a generation where it's very much on autopilot, where they're like, this is why I've argued many times on the show, where I'm like, it seems like Sony is just becoming Apple in the sense that they can rely, a much smaller Apple, where they can rely upon a hardcore group of people. The reality is, right, you can release the best Android phone imaginable, and I don't give a fuck. I don't. I don't care. Like, I'm going to buy an Apple iPhone, no matter what you do. I'm going to buy a watch from Apple and all the rest, and you can't really do much about that. And I actually think Sony's in a similar situation with PlayStation at this point, where it's like, what are you going to go play, Xbox? I mean, you could go play PC and spend a ton of money on that, or you can kind of stay where you are and your friends are at and your games are at. And I think they're taking advantage of it, which maybe is to the point of why they're selling it at a little bit more of a premium than you would imagine. Although I think that margins are just urgent at this point too. You know, they're hurting. All the money they spent on Bungie, writing down all of the Concord money and Firewalk's acquisition and all the rest. I mean, they have to figure that out and deal with it.
There's a good chance, though, again, like that they're like, why would we lose money? We know with the amount we're going to have at launch, it's going to sell. If it doesn't, we can drop the price, and we think it's going to sell out anyway. So why wouldn't we make sure we're in the black?
You said there's two interesting things to say about pricing, and one of them I wanted to ask you about. The PS4 Pro and PS4 thing was very compelling because, as I recall, PS4 Pro basically was being sold at the price that the PS4 was being sold at, and they dropped the PS4's price. Now, I don't think that was a reasonable expectation here, but that would have been fucking sick. You know,
they could have done it if they wanted to. They could, no disk drive, but they could have done it.
Right. And so that would have been an interesting thing. But the other thing here is just the general mantra of what people are willing to pay for these devices. And it just seems like maybe we've hit the limit of a more casual player base that consoles are more focused on. Do you think that there is an argument to be made at this level that it's like, why not buy a PC? Do you think that it's not that you can make a comparable, and we know you can't, right? Like Digital Foundry says you can't. I know that Mark Cerny was making fun of someone in an interview, making a video about PS4 Pro or whatever, and then they used all used parts and shit like that. And he's like, you could buy a used PS4 right now or whatever. So
yeah, people always do that. I mean, I remember when the PS4 and Xbox One came out, and someone was like, I'm going to make a console build, and they call them like potato masher builds. I mean, God, dude, they had like this like 2 gigahertz quad core that cost $50 on a $30 motherboard that they literally nailed to a board of wood with a 750 Ti or something on it back then, 2013 or 14. And they were like, look, it's a little stronger than the series, or not the series, the Xbox One. And I'm like, well, first of all, the Xbox is weaker than the PlayStation. So your PC also is. Also, you paid $500. PlayStation's $400. Also, the PlayStation isn't nailed to a fucking board of wood. I can put it in my backpack and it won't break. And also, by the way, it comes with a warranty for all the parts, and it has a Blu-ray player. So last gen was a much bigger deal. I'd say this time you can get closer than before. But I mean, look, it's getting like a $500 graphics card. I mean, it's really most comparable in performance probably to a 7800 XT from AMD. We'll have to see. It uses a newer architecture than any graphics card from AMD you can buy right now. So until RDNA 4 comes to desktop, much like RDNA 2 coming to desktop, actually, I think after the PS5 or around the same time. It was like a weird time where we're like, which RDNA is it? Like, that could be even stronger than that, is what I'm saying. So anyways, at a minimum $500 graphics card, $100 CPU. Maybe I could argue it's only a $100 one. I mean, then you have to add the motherboard. So what are we at there? 700 RAM. I mean, you're gonna need more than enough RAM because PC isn't as efficient. You know, you're adding another probably $60 there. Power supply's $50, cooler $50 for all, and including all the other fans, chassis $50. I mean, I've done the math, and I always come around to it's about a $1,000 PC, or more, and it comes with a nice SSD. This isn't a cheaper SSD trying to save money, used parts PC. So it's a good deal compared to PC, I would say. And I think, again, Sony's going to look at that and go, see, it's a good deal. It's just not like before where it's half the price of an equivalent PC that isn't nailed to a board of wood.
Why do you think they focused so much on... Let me back up before I even ask you this question and set it up. Cerny had said something interesting during the conversation, which was that people are choosing frame rates over fidelity. This was the opposite of what I was told about one specific big game where people are actually choosing higher graphical fidelity over frame rates. But he's indicating, and I believe him entirely. It's just opposite of what I've heard anecdotally. But it surprises me that knowing that they went in a direction where frame rates wouldn't necessarily be helped as much as the graphical fidelity, right? Because you would want a better CPU, right? If you wanted to, and I guess you can't really do that with the console. But it seems like
it would have required a lot more work than the GPU changing.
And the CPU would be, and you had just said it would be significantly cheaper, right, than a GPU.
So I think there's a big misconception here, and it's mostly, if I may, because I have to deal with it in my podcast in the comments, propagated by the PC master race people who have no clue at all how much CPU power you actually fucking need to run a game. And I'm so sick of seeing this. You can see I'm getting mad. Like, go right now, everyone, go to Tech Power Up, go to the AMD 9950X review, one of the latest CPUs. Go, I'll even do it right here for you. This is the example that I believe just completely ends this entire argument about if the CPU is enough for what Sony wants. It's not what you would usually pair with a GPU like this on PC. But if I go to 720p benchmarks, the strongest CPU is some Zen 4 with 3D stacked cache thing, getting on average 218 frames per second. Not what we're talking about here. But if I scroll down to a Zen 2 CPU, one that they have on this chart is the 3300X. This is a 3.5 gigahertz quad core, 109 frames per second on average. In 720p, these games are running more like 4K or 1440p, which would be lower frame rates from the GPU. I do not know what people are smoking. I do not know why people think this can't run games at 60 or maybe even 120 half the time. A quad core clocked lower of the same architecture on PC, which isn't even as efficient because it runs Windows, is getting 109 frames per second on average. Half the core is lower clocks. Guys, it's strong enough. I do not know where this is coming from.
So we should expect then, because that was what was so compelling about Cerny, and I don't think he would say it unless they were telling the truth, is you should expect that you don't have to make a choice anymore, that you can have the best of both worlds, maybe not 4K 60, but 1440 60 or something like that, as opposed to 1080 60, which is what we're still getting with some of these games. Then again, I see some of these most beautiful, especially first party games on PlayStation 5, where it's like Horizon Forbidden West is maybe the most beautiful game I've ever seen in my life and runs perfectly well on a base PS5. So we should only expect it to get even better. That's good information, because I know there were, and again, from a layman's perspective, I was like, okay, so you made a choice about fidelity over processing. But what you're saying is that this, I guess, would offload some of what the GPU was doing prior, allowing the CPU to...
the CPU sends commands to the GPU, and then there's usually, out of 8 cores, maybe 1 to 2 of the threads, like Trump doing this, 1 to 2 of the threads get hit harder. So those 2 cores are going to be running at the max speed, which I want to get into this because this is something I learned from a developer this week that kind of blew my mind a little bit. But it's really like, what now? 3.85 gigahertz. They do clock the CPU higher on the PS5 Pro. But put a pin in that because I know there's a question about if that's true. So 3.85 gigahertz, 2 of the cores are going to be running that fast. And that's really what's going to limit sending, probably saying this wrong, but the command frames to the GPU. As long as that's fast enough to hit 60, then the other 6 cores can handle whatever you're doing with physics and not loading, because the PS5 offloads that. The PS5 is the equivalent of, I've heard 12 to 20 cores in the performance of loading. When I have a 16 core desktop, when I load, my favorite example is the Division 2, because that's where I noticed it. All 32 threads, 100% usage. Sony has offloaded that to these, I forgot what they're called, but they're like little ASIC FPGA units built in to handle these tasks. So you don't even need to touch the CPU to do those things. So as long as the CPU can send the draw calls to the graphics card fast enough, which it's running games at 60 right now, we know it can, then the question is, do you want to get to 200 frames per second or not? Probably not. No one has a 200 hertz display TV usually. No, you just want to you want to make the frame rate more consistent. And I can bring up so many examples of this. Like I know Digital Foundry recently had a hacked PS5 so they could hack in different settings for Red Dead Redemption 2. And they found in 4K, they found the graphics card was still the bottleneck, not the CPU, that they could get way higher frame rates at really high resolutions with Red Dead Redemption 2 on the PS5. Frame rates that Rockstar won't let us buy for some reason on console. But there's just no evidence. I mean, will there be some games where there's a shaky frame rate a little bit? Or should I say not easy to always hit 60? Yes, but the only games I can think of in my life that come to mind right now are like Flight Simulator, which isn't on PlayStation, and I guess some RTS games might, like Age of Empires 4.
Or like Civilization 7 when that comes out next year.
Sure, but do you need that to run at 120 frames per second? That game.
Also, I guess that's not RTS. That really is turn-based, so you don't have to. So there is. Yeah, so there. That's good because this explains from a more layman's enthusiast perspective of why I'm excited about the unit was because it was the PS4 and the PS4 Pro that introduced to me, beautiful, really beautiful graphics, right? And some higher frame rates, but usually 30 frames. And when you jump over to PS5, I wasn't a frame rate person at that time in my life. I always said I knew frame rate savants that could like call a frame rate like to the actual digit. It was like so fucking weird,
I kind of can.
I didn't see it. I just like was like, I'm a console guy. I'm a fucking, I'm a surf. Like I don't know anything about this stuff. And then when I went to PS5 and I started seeing it because everything was running in 60 frames, or most things were running in 60 frames, and I was selecting the option to run in 60 frames as opposed to a higher resolution. And I'm like, well, I'm never going back. Like, this is actually amazing. Like, I can't believe that I was playing like that for so long. And now the PS5 Pro presents to me an enthusiast with a little bit of money to be able to spend on these things. So I get that. But an enthusiast nonetheless to say like, well, what if you don't have to make a choice now? And that's compelling. That in and of itself, because I know when I'm playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, right, which was awesome, I know I'm seeing weird, like the graphical fidelity is bad. Like everyone has weird shadows and it's a low res and all of the rest, but the game is running at a decent frame rate. And now they're saying, and I think Digital Foundry even was, or maybe it was CNET that did it, where they were like, we played Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's like revelatory playing it at this on the PS5 Pro because you don't have to make that concessions anymore. That in and of itself is amazing. So giving me this unit for the back half of the PS5 generation, I'll take it. And I'm
trust me, people, it's because of the graphics card. It is not because of the CPU that the frame rate's better there, in addition to the settings, And I think also this is something that I've actually drilled into on some podcasts and videos as well, is people need to understand too that the CPU that Sony chose for the PS5 is not standard Zen 2. I forgot who did this on Twitter, but someone did an analysis of it who does like, really advanced photography, zooms in, takes notes, and like looks at the transistors and says, this is what they did, And they found that this version of Zen 2 stripped out a lot of these special compute functions that you would never use in gaming. You might use that in AI or something, and they use that to both make the CPU more dense so it takes up less space, costs less money. And they also use that to spread out the thermal load so that it doesn't get as hot when it's running. It's really interesting. This is a smaller, more cost-effective, only for gaming, but that's all it's going to do, version of Zen 2 that costs Sony money. And developers are programming to the metal for that brain to run every game. Were they to want to go to a new architecture for the CPU, they're going to have to spend a lot of money making sure things don't break. Much more likely the CPU incompatibility is going to break something. And because it's already a more dense Zen 2, I don't know how much more. Zen 2 itself is also really cost-effective architecture. It's not as strong as Zen 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever. But even now, AMD sells APUs that use Zen 2 and more advanced graphics because it's really cheap, and it gets the job done. So I think there's very real reasons outside of laziness that they chose to stick with it until next gen, where they're going to put all this money in making, who knows, some custom version of Zen 6 or 7 that perfectly does what they want them to and does not break compatibility. But that takes a lot of R&D to make sure you don't break that compatibility. And just so people know how crazy these chips are getting, I had someone on recently. It was John Petty, who does a lot of analytical research for Silicon. He brought up, and this is true apparently, on a broken Silicon, that we don't even know how many transistors are in these. We say around for a reason. They don't know. NVIDIA doesn't know the exact transistor count at a 4090. They don't know. They're guessing. That's how complex this has gotten.
That's so
And
interesting.
so you're asking Sony to fix that? Nah, they're not going to.
Are you gonna buy the PS5 Pro?
Well, were it to be 500 or 600, it would have been a slam dunk answer. Yes. Now I'd say, I don't know, leaning towards yes, just to spoil myself because I've worked so hard this year. And also, if I can just trade in the PS5, it's like, you know, how much do we spend on games every year? Why not have them all run better? So I lean towards yes at this point as well. And this is informed by what I'm hearing about performance, which they seem to be underselling it, in my opinion.
I can't wait to see how some of these games like, because we have the list of like kind of games that are already out, legacy games, and that launch window games. So Until Dawn, for instance, will be coming out, in Silent Hill 2 will both work on PS5 Pro, but they're going to come out before the Pro, and I don't want to wait, to play them. But you're going to get such a better performance and such a better experience on the PS5 Pro, and I'm jealous. And I do think, it's not for, I don't know how exactly there. I haven't been and looked at the documentation myself, and our games wouldn't really have to mess with it, but I'm pretty sure that if you're releasing a game around now, you have to support PS5 Pro. With some option. So it's going to be baked in.
Well, and I want to get into that too, because the next episode of Broken Silicon, so we're recording this on Monday. On Tuesday, I have a developer on, Brian Heemskirk. This will be episode 275, I believe. And he tells me that the way this works is the PlayStation 5 has had flags for a Pro or a non-Pro, for maybe a handheld, who knows, since launch. So every game already has the flags for multiple quality modes and adjusting for different types of configurations were Sony to ever release it. That's not something that happened with PS4. That's why it was a bit of a headache for him, according to him. So it's the checkbox is already there before the Pro's out. So that's cool. Now, another developer, part of this leak that I put out, on a live stream, I believe it was last Friday, which I would really recommend people check out here because it blew my mind. This person has a Pro, and of course, I'm not going to show it. Sony already tried to take down my YouTube channel when I shared something literally before, but I can share the information. There's nothing they can do. I saw footage of a Pro, non-Pro, running a game side by side, just one game. It's one of the more common engines, though. This isn't some bespoke weird one. And the game on PlayStation 5 was running dynamic 1080p to 1600p, generally above 50 frames with drops to 40 sometimes hitting 60. All right. The PS5 Pro locks 60. It's like if you ever looked at Digital Foundry, just straight line.
Right.
Like nothing. Nothing was wavering. And it was dynamic 1600p to 4K with ultra settings. So he turned up the settings. And now some people would hear 1080p to 1600p, 1600p to 4K. Is that really a big deal? 1600p is, I believe, 90 or 220% more pixels than 1080p. The minimum the Pro could even dynamically go down to. I mean, it is over double the pixels the minimum the PlayStation 5 can go down to. Now, but right before we started recording, which is why I was a minute late, I was talking to this developer like, give me an apples to apples, because I don't want to tell people some of the math I was crunching. Is this giving you really triple the pixels? Because they're like, it seems like in one scene where they turned off dynamic, and obviously I can't say who it is, but I want to thank this person for doing this for me. They locked the scenes and they locked the resolution, no dynamic, and it was getting it was pushing 55% more pixels. So that's not 46%. That's just one scene in one game. And I asked, did you do anything to optimize it? No PSSRs turned on, nothing. Just check the box, run Pro. So there's things you can do to optimize for the shaders, the more compute units. There's things you can do to optimize. Without optimization, we're getting an over 50% boost in frame rate. And this person wants to look into testing 8K for fun. I don't think they're going to do 8K. And they want to try 120 hertz mode, because to me, especially with PSSR involved, it seems plausible to me half of these games could run at the same settings or higher at 120 hertz. That's crazy. I mean, and this isn't involving ray tracing where the boost is even higher. I think this thing is over double the performance if you know what you're doing. And if you literally press a button and walk away and then Sony validates the patch, you're getting a 50% boost. So this is an upgrade, people. Sony is vastly underselling it with their weird 46% higher raster thing they've said. I don't know why they said that.
Yeah, I think that's what I was saying earlier about the presentation. I don't think being ideal in the sense that I don't know that they could do it ideally, because YouTube is going to fuck everything up and it's going to be all artifacted and messed up looking. And I almost wonder if things like this are almost better as like a press release, in some sense.
Like with the little slider you can move to the side of the frame.
Right. Yeah.
That might be a better way to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Why do you think that they didn't show any new games along with it? I think, to me, some people are upset about this. To me, that seems obvious. Like that's a major marketing problem for them. We don't want to show games with the Pro reveal and then make it seem like you need to have the Pro and that it's going to be a downgrade from everything else. So I'm not so surprised by that, but I think it is funny that they did show The Last of Us Part 2 and some of these other older games. Why do you think that they didn't show anything new?
I think the best way I can answer this question is, which games should they have shown in your opinion? What would be the three, if you were to pick three? And let's make it 4 to make it harder. What are the 4 games they should have shown to avoid this criticism?
Maybe like Ragnarok, Spider-Man 2. I would have loved to see something third party or like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, just because I think it really struggled, or even Final Fantasy 16 if you want to go back a little bit more and not bring Final Fantasy VII into focus, but want to do Final Fantasy 16. Like, that game was so wonderful, but definitely the frame rate struggled.
That one would be an ideal one I'd want to see. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that would have been a big one. And then maybe something third, maybe not even third party, because you could do the show or something, but maybe something a little more generic for the greater audience, the USA Today writer or whatever, like Madden or college football or something, and just show that off. But
no, Ragnarok and Spider-Man 2, are those both on PS4?
Spider-Man 2 isn't. Ragnarok. Okay. I don't think Ragnarok is either, actually. I think Horizon.
Isn't it? I think that one is. But I guess the point I'm trying to get to is, it's like, I think they themselves have like, where is the next Naughty Dog game? Like, where is it feels a little bit to me like there should be more new PS5 games, and I think they showed off the most popular ones, and it is unfortunate that those are the ones that are also on PS4. I honestly think that's the answer.
Yeah,
I do think Final Fantasy. By the way,
Ragnarok is on PS4. I just looked it up, so I was wrong about that. I don't know why I didn't think that.
But I think that's where your problem is. Like, it's hard for us to find more than 4 first-party games that aren't on PS4.
Yeah, it's true. The Last of Us. They were pointing out weird shit too. Like, I thought Ratchet's a beautiful game, but it's like, yeah, look at the crowd. It's like, come on, man. Like, I don't know. You guys got, because like we said, the Mark Cerny Power Hour was so good, and the other presentations for PS4 Pro and everything. I was like, maybe expecting a little bit more, but I don't know why, because I just think we're dealing with a different Sony. But
so that's my guess, though, right? They had to do first party because it's hard to get third party to buy in on short notice without leaking it, probably. And but yeah, I think Final Fantasy 16, that would have been the ideal one. That one really struggles, and it's just beautiful. It's odd they didn't push for that one, but I think that's their problem, is that there should be more games by now. Where's the Bloodborne remaster go?
Yeah, I don't know, man. Heard about that so long ago. I don't even know.
I know.
I don't know. I do think there's this rumor that there's going to be a state of play near the end of the month. And because I just think that there are obvious games that need to be shown. Like, obviously Venom is in there. You're going to want to show Wolverine.
Oh yeah.
Ghost of Tsushima 2 or whatever they call it, Ghost of whatever. And then maybe something brand new. And then maybe next year you start rolling out Bend or Media Molecule or whoever's now. Media Molecule probably wouldn't be ready.
Media Molecule. I don't know if they make games.
Yeah, well, apparently they do, but we don't know for sure. All right. I don't want to hold you for too much longer, but I wanted to ask you about 2 other things, if you don't mind, real quick. What do you think about the idea of a PlayStation handheld? Where are we on this now? The rumors about this are pretty heavy. I know Tom Henderson and a couple others have reported on this, and you've had reports on it as well that I've seen. We've discussed on the show the strong accessory sales for PlayStation. Now, obviously, this is going to be a much more expensive device, but I don't think it's meaningless that the best-selling American accessories are the DualSense Edge and the Portal. And that I've been told by someone at Sony that like basically every Portal they make, they sell immediately. It's like you can't even they didn't expect it. It was kind of a test bed to see what would happen. It's selling extraordinarily good, much better than they thought. And I wonder if this is kind of put a fire poker in their ass about getting going on something a little more proper. But I feel like maybe they already are, and this just goes to show that they're in the right direction. Here's my theory. What about a portable PS4 Pro? Could they do something like that? Would it even be worth it doing something like that?
Well, they certainly could do it. I mean, all they would have to do is quite literally die shrink the thing to 4 nanometer. And I think, God, what would the density uplift be? They were on like, I think 16 nanometer before. Then you're going to 7, which is like way higher, 5, like another 50. I mean, you could make, a die that's like 200 millimeters squared, probably 100 or smaller, which now you're getting smartphone sized. So, yeah, I mean, I think they could do that. My personal opinion, I think I brought this up the last time I was on, so let's get the facts straight first before we speculate.
Sure.
I think they started work on the handheld. I don't have my notes pulled up, but I know I put the leak out in January. I think they started work on that around then, maybe end of last year. I've actually followed up with people, by the way. The PlayStation 6 is still in high level design. So they haven't locked in what they want to do. By the way, an opinion I have is they want to see how well the PS5 Pro sells so they can decide before they lock in the design. Are we going with 48 gigabytes or 32 gigs of RAM? What are people willing to pay for here? So I think there's a lot of that going on right now too with the Pro, where they're trying to decide. So the PlayStation 6 is, I'm pretty sure, going to be 2 nanometer. That's going to be like wildly expensive per die, relatively speaking. So they're probably going to want to make it small though too. And then everyone tells me it's got to have 32 gigs of RAM. It's not going to be cheap. And I would assume they probably want to give it 2 terabytes of storage, although who knows if what it means to have storage will change again. So, I mean, I think what they're looking at with the PS6 is 2 nanometer, 32 gigabytes. They're going, this is going to be expensive. Can we get away with a $700, $800 console, or are they going to shrug off 700 and we're going to have to go or poo-poo that and go, we have to go cheaper and we have to make some cuts?
Do you think that's what I was going to ask you? Do you think that's possible? Because I said on the show kind of confidently, but maybe you know more than I do. It's like once you hit the PS5 Pro sale of $700, you can't go lower than that for the next console, can you? Like,
I don't know. I think if it completely bombed, the decision they might make is, okay, we're going with maybe even a 150 millimeter squared die. I don't know, like maybe really small, and 32 gigs of RAM, and maybe we're going to wait until 28 for when this is all cheaper. If it sells really well, I think they'll go, oh, it's sold out? All right, 48 gigabytes of RAM. Let's make this a really large uplift and drop it in 27. I think that's the decision they have to make. But the fact that it's still in high level design, and I think it started work about a year ago, I think that tells you what we can expect about the handheld as well. Because the handheld work started about the same time, I think so, or actually after it. So I don't think it can come out for like 2 years. It's kind of as I continue to derail my own train of thought, trying to get to here. And if it can't come out for at least, because I'm told the PlayStation 6, it would be a Hail Mary for it to come out at the end of 26. So it's probably a late 27 product earliest. I don't see why you would do a handheld now unless it's based on the PS5.
Yeah, right.
Because why spend the money die shrinking and doing all this stuff? I remember when I put out that original leak, I speculated there's 2 ways they could go about it. The PS6 way or the PS5 or PS4 way. And since then, I've really kind of calcified on they could do it, but man, that would be like a rapid Skunksworks project, because it just doesn't make sense to me to, like, a year before the PS6 launch a PS4 handheld, when if they've already got these flags there, like I said, they have flags in PS5, not just for the Pro. It's for something weaker if you want it to be. I don't know why they wouldn't just make a PS6 handheld and launch it at the same time. And the way I would argue to do it if I was Sony is I would say, let's use the same die. Let's use the same die as the console version of the PS6, and we'll just use the worst yields for it. Right now I hear like a lot of the upcoming products from AMD and NVIDIA, I think you've heard this before, like they'll disable one of the cores in the PS4 and disable some of the compute units for yields. I'm hearing like they might not even need to do that pretty soon. Like the Switch didn't need to because it used a really good node, and the Switch 2, I'm hearing, might not even disable any parts of it. So, I think it's quite possible they might just take like 90% of the PS6, sell it at whatever 3 gigahertz, whatever compute units, and then disable it by 10%. And then just 10% of production is handhelds with the same die clocked lower so that it's running at 20 watts instead of 200 watts. Yeah, it'll probably give you a third the performance, but that would save a lot on design costs. And if it doesn't sell well, we didn't make another die, and it could be a really cool special edition. Because this uses the same hardware clocked lower as the PS6, it's always going to run PS6 games and PS5 games, guys. And if we stop making it, dude, you've got a $5,000 collector's item here. And that might get more people to buy it with the worry that it will stop being manufactured. So if I were Sony, I would either do that with the PS5 or the PS6. If I did it with the PS5, it'd be the test the waters. I don't know if you do it with the PS5 Pro die. That would be interesting, if they disabled the PS5 Pro down into something else. But I think they would just take that and clock it lower and then have a special edition PS5 handheld. If that sells out, they'll know to get to work on the PS6 version. That's what I would do. I can't be and for me, that's the least work for the developers. Same console. It's the least cost, same die. And if it doesn't work out, it's not like you have to worry about a PlayStation Vita PSN support for 10 years.
Right.
It uses the same OS. Who cares?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It's it's funny to see the race for the handheld kind of reemerge, because I know Xbox is eagerly pursuing and will probably get theirs to market much earlier. It sounds like, than Sony, but it seemed like Switch kind of showed people a little something, but they all thought it would be too underpowered to matter. And then Steam Deck. So you came out. So you had this market of people want handheld games, but we don't really want to go in that direction. And then it's well, you could have a powerful handheld. And I think it's all, what I talk to my friend, not my friends, but I guess connections at Sony is and it's the same thing with Portal. It's it's all chip damage towards the end of keeping you engaged. Whatever keeps you engaged on PlayStation, whatever we have to do, that's the salvation of the company in the future. So if we have to go to you and make a handheld, if we have to go to you and make this Portal, if we have to go to you and do this and this and this and make a mobile game and go on PC, and they're going to do it.
I think what Sony saw with the Steam Deck is a lot of people say they get Steam versions of games simply because they run better than the Epic Game Store or something like that. Sure. But also because they're well, I don't have a Steam Deck, but what if I want a Steam Deck or a Steam Deck 2? I know my entire Steam library is going to run on this handheld.
Mm-hmm.
If I get a game on Origin, which became EA Play for some reason or something, that might not run on it. And I think Sony saw that and they're oh, well, if we had a handheld, then people are I could get this, the equivalent of a gaming laptop PlayStation that they can get on the go. And this would, no, don't worry about Xbox. I know they have a handheld. We have a handheld too. Stay in our, the Pro, stay in our ecosystem, stay in, don't build a PC. You want the graphics, you can still just go to a PlayStation version of it. I think that's a very compelling argument. People want handheld Sony. They just don't want Vita memory cards.
Right. Yeah. And the power, I can't even get into the Vita right now. It's just, it's too painful.
I have a Vita. The Vita.
No, I know. It's just too painful. But this is so fun, man. It's cool to finally have this thing real. We knew it was real. I knew it was real when you started talking about it. Obviously, other people were corroborating that information. When I first heard from someone in January from a publisher, I don't reach out proactively to anyone. People reach out to me and tell me things, and I verify who they are, and I go on Moby Games, I go on LinkedIn, and I triangulate and all that kind of stuff. And I'm
that's
okay.
How I do it too.
Yeah, and
can you talk to me? Are you real?
Right, exactly. And then usually, sometimes talk on a phone or a video call or whatever. And it's yeah, wow, you guys are really being presented with this stuff, this documentation about this machine. And I knew that for sure in January. And what I was saying on the show is it's so funny, the PS5 Pro denier, right to the last minute, before they're it's not real. It's not coming out.
I think it became obvious in the middle of this year when you had I guess none of them really said it publicly, but by then I had some developers here it is, I'm holding it on camera. It was pretty obvious I think by then.
It was interesting. I'm really interested and excited to see if Ampere Analysis, their white paper, is right that this thing will actually sell pretty decently. There is some argument that PS5 might have even sold so briskly early on because of COVID monies and and all that kind of stuff. So we have to see how this all plays out. This like I said, the sticker shock is real. I get it. When I saw that, my wife got mad at me because I was on my phone in the bathroom, we wake up late, and I was $700. That's what I said. And she was like, shut up, you scared me or whatever. And I'm I just couldn't believe. But slowly I let it wash over me. I'm like, all right, so what does it mean from a technological standpoint? What does it mean to replicate this as a PC? What is it? And I came around to it pretty quickly. So I'm looking forward to it. Maybe we can have you back on to talk about it when it's actually here, and we can see what it can do. I hope to pre-order it on PlayStation Direct. I'll see if I can get one, but I'll be ready to go that day. But I don't know if I'll get one.
I'm not disregarding you right now. I'm talking to someone who's testing it in 120 hertz mode. Finally, they got it working in 120 hertz mode, the PS5 Pro. So I'm just kind of trying to see if I can throw a couple other pieces of candy here at the end. Yeah, I mean, it looks like this game. What I'm trying to get the person to answer me is if it's at the exact same settings, but it seems to be running it for the people just seeing the CPU well above 100 frames with zero optimizations. By the way, everybody. So that's I guess a good thing to kind of a last thing to bring up is what I'm curious about is how many games give you a 120 hertz mode, because I'm seeing here it's at least 55% faster. I mean, if you run The Last of Us Part 2 in performance mode, it runs 80, 90 frames. I think same with Ragnarok, which is how I played it on my high refresh rate TV. 50% more than that gets you to 120, probably a locked 120. So I think there's a good chance what we're going to see is pretty much all games get some pro update that just cranks up settings and locked 60. And then anyone who puts in like a week worth of work, it doesn't seem like it's that hard, people here, are going to, especially if they use PSSR, is going to have a ray tracing 60 hertz. It's always going to be dynamic res because locking resolution, I think, is personally stupid. Like if you need to bump down the resolution 5%, I won't notice to keep it at 60. We're going to have dynamic around 4K 60 hertz, and I think it's going to be okay, so it's bouncing around 100 hertz again without even using PSSR or any optimizations. I think we're going to see a lot of games add 90, 100, and 120 hertz VRR modes. And I think that's going to be awesome, because remember, this is going to be those frame rates at the settings we have now, so or higher. So we could possibly have like dynamic res sometimes hitting 4K 100 hertz modes on a console. I think that's why they think they can get away with $700. So.
Yeah, well, we'll see if they get away with it. I suspect they will. Yeah,
and one more thing.
Yeah, please.
The high CPU frequency mode. Sorry to pile on at the end here. I always seem to.
No,
do
it's
that,
all good,
though.
dude. Please.
I know, Mark. I don't know why Mark Cerny didn't make this more clear. He said there's a high CPU frequency mode where you can trade GPU performance for a higher CPU clock. Of course, I'm not going to show you the documentation, so Sony doesn't sue me again. But apparently, going with the higher clock speed for the CPU only lowers GPU performance on average 1.5%. This is nothing. So any developer that's worried about sitting 60 hertz with the CPU, they can add 10% more CPU performance with a negligible GPU performance hit, which I think is really interesting.
Let me ask you this last postscript, because I know this is about PlayStation 6, but it came out today or today-ish from Reuters. There's word that AMD has the contract for a PlayStation 6, that they beat out Intel and I guess Broadcom. What are you thinking about this?
Yeah, Intel's been trying to win almost anything lately. That was part of one of those leaks I put at the beginning of this year. It's AMD. AMD is for the handheld. Talking to people at AMD working on it. AMD has the contract for the PS6 and the handheld and the Steam Deck 2, by the way. So if anyone's curious, Steam Deck 2, 100%. AMD, no, it's not ARM, by the way. None of these are ARM. They're all going to be x86, which works fine. And it's in high-level development. So, yeah, I mean, I think 27 or 28 is when you'll see the PS6 100% from AMD.
Yeah, I'm reading the story, and it says that I guess Sony was going to go to AMD probably anyway because they were afraid of like compatibility between the machines. So there is that, and I guess there's that extra influence there. But it's always interesting to get these new stories, although I know you reported a lot of this already.
Yeah, but no, it's interesting to hear that more. The more interesting aspect for me is that Intel really tried to win the next Xbox and lost. Like, really tried to win the next Xbox. And the people I talked to at AMD were actually very pissed about that, because they thought Microsoft was just jerking them off. And it looks like they were, because they went with AMD as well. And I guess I'll also say AMD bid on the Switch too, and barely lost. The next Switch was almost made by AMD, not NVIDIA.
What's the next? How powerful is this device going to be? Less than the PS5, the new Switch?
Yes, that's a big scoop for Moore's Law is Dead. Actually, it's should be 1536 CUDA cores. I believe 256 is what's in the Switch. Better architecture. Should be made at Samsung. So they're cheaping out a little bit. It's Nintendo. But I believe it's going to have 12 gigabytes of RAM. 12 or 16, but probably 12. So more RAM than the Series S, by the way. And I think what I've heard, which really piqued my interest, is that the Switch 2 was targeting, and this is why AMD lost the contract, to use, I think, 5 watts or less, or much less energy than the Switch does, in handheld mode. And that would tell me they want that to be a fanless design. But then when you put it into a dock, there's a fan on the dock, and it just blows through a vent. So I think they might be targeting like really low clock speeds for the graphics cards, like 400 to 600 megahertz. But then once you put it in a dock, it's maybe 1.2 to 1.5 gigahertz. And over like doubles performance. And I think that's a really cool design. And I think, especially with NVIDIA DLSS, it's going to get to, in docked mode, it will probably feel like a Series S or better, with the exception that the CPU is a little weaker, but the GPU is probably almost comparable. And in graphics performance, it should be stronger than the Steam Deck is. CPU maybe same, slightly weaker.
And should we expect Xbox to go first between PS5 or PS6 and the next Xbox? I assume that they want to start things over again, I assume, urgently.
So, right. Microsoft jerked AMD around, almost went to Intel, which was a big deal because if you're someone who follows like computer hardware, that's crazy that Intel would try to their graphics cards are a complete failure. So if Microsoft went with Intel, that would have been wild that they chose Intel. And so because of that, though, I think Sony was in PS6 development half a year to a year before Xbox started theirs. So I would say logically, especially because they canceled the Elite, they should launch first. I mean, this is in the gutter here. They need to start over. So I would say they should launch first. But if they do, it's going to be a very rushed console. But the Series X was rushed as well. They apparently weren't going to launch until 21, until Sony clearly was, and that's why a lot of early performance wasn't, and still isn't actually, as good as PlayStation, because they had to rush a lot of the software. So that's more behind the scenes baseball there. But yeah, I'd say they should try to launch first. I've seen the rumors of that. I was very skeptical and dismissive of them, but I guess technically all I can confirm is if they do launch first, they designed and launched it in like a third less time than Sony did, and so that'll be quite a feat to do successfully.
Interesting. Well, we'll keep an eye on all of this. It was awesome to be able to talk to you, Tom, about all of this and get a little bit more knowledge on the PS5 Pro as it comes out in November. Pre-order soon if you're interested on PlayStation Direct, and then retailers I think will start taking them in October. So if you miss out there, you'll be able to get yours from a retailer of choice. Where can people find you? Everyone knows where to find you, but just in case we have some new audience members here, tell them where to find your podcast and all the rest.
So yeah, my YouTube channel is Moore's Law is Dead. I don't know when this will be coming out to Sacred Symbols, but by the time it does, there'll be a very PlayStation, well, not just PlayStation, but very console-centric discussion with a developer who both does artistry for games, and Brian Heemskirk, a Massive Damage Inc., actually. And also knows a lot about the technical side. So he's awesome to talk to because he gets the programming, the art, and why the hardware sometimes does or doesn't work as well as you want it to. So that's a great episode to come out. So please subscribe there. And of course, Broken Silicon is that podcast that we drop in addition to all these other videos on the YouTube channel. So you can subscribe to Broken Silicon on any podcast app of your choice as well.
Cool, man. Well, I appreciate you. It's good to see you again. Good to have you back in the fold. Always good to get an email from you, and good to be here with you guys as well on Sacred Symbols, PlayStation Podcast. Hope you enjoyed our supplemental podcast about PS5 and all of the rest, PS5 Pro, I should say. We'll see you next time for more. Until then, thanks again. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.